Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like-minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but 2 of my last 3 trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler, and thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler Podcast, Episode 71. Today, the Amateur Traveler Podcast goes to Liverpool.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there, and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no. 15-hour flight, oh, I don't think I'll ever be coming home. You know I love it. I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen.
We want to hear about the Paris boutique with the fine silk PJs and the New Orleans cafe with the best beignets. So what's your story? Visit Sheridan.com to share your story and get tips from fellow travelers.
The first news story I have for you today is bad news for frequent flyers on U.S. Airways. In case you didn't notice, U.S. Airways has just recently cut in half from 3 years to 18 months the time it allows frequent flyers to retain their miles without any account activity. So pay attention to that if you're a U.S. Airways frequent flyer. Links to that story from Smarter Traveler newsletter can be found at the show notes at amateurtraveler.com or in the enhanced iTunes version of this show. The second news story, a little bit of the news of the weather weird. A tornado struck London. That's what I said. On December 8th, a tornado set down in London. It lasted less than a couple minutes, according to The Independent. First, the sky suddenly blackened over London, and there was a flash of lightning and thunder, followed by a maelstrom of rain and hail. But then came the terrible wind, rapidly forming itself into a twister that tore its way through a cluster of suburban homes with the force of an express train, then dissipated quickly as it arrived. Wouldn't count as a major tornado by those of you from the Midwest, but it was enough to damage more than 100 houses and leave 100 people homeless. I had the opportunity this week to go down to Southern California to pick up my son from college, and while I was down there to attend the Orange County Podcasters Meetup. I had an email from Craig Patchett, who found out I was coming and asked if he could interview me. I'm not sure when or if that interview will show up on the web, but I'll let you know if it does. What he didn't mention, and what I didn't think to ask, is when would you interview me? I was thinking he was planning on doing it after the meetup, and he was planning on doing it as part of the entertainment for the meetup, as a way of demonstrating how to do interviewing. Slightly more nerve-wracking to be interviewed while you're sitting in front of 30 other podcasters. And then to end things on somewhat of a lighter note, there's a list that I'm posting links to on the show notes again from Fodor's on the 10 must-do adventures for 2007. They include things like sailing on sailing ships, safaris, Costa Rican wildlife tours, and, of course, blasting off on the rocket plane. I'd like to welcome to the show Don McAllister from Screencasts Online, which is a podcast that I watch. It's a video podcast about how to do things on your Mac. Don, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
And I asked Don to be on the show when we were talking at the Podcast Expo. Don is from Liverpool, which makes you a Liverpudlian, I believe.
That's correct, yes, or a Scouser. That's another term.
I read that, okay, which it comes from a type of stew, I understand?
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, I think it's a type of old Irish stew. That there used to be a lot of Irish immigrants into Liverpool, and they brought with them the scouse, which is a type of there's two types of scouse. There's the normal scouse, which contains meat and vegetables, and there's also a thing called blind scouse as well, which is the scouse without the meat for when times were hard, and you could have scouse without the meat in it.
And Don was telling me that something is going on with Liverpool here, starting in 2007, that I thought would be of interest to you, the listeners. So, Don, you want to tell us a little more about what's happening here in Liverpool?
Yeah, Liverpool is going through a bit of a renaissance at the moment, in that back in 2003 we were awarded the status of Capital of Culture, and that's the European Capital of Culture, which were due to commence in 2008. So since then there's sort of been 4 or 5 years preparation, 3 years preparation, building up to the big event in 2008 where we take on the mantle of European Capital of Culture, and that's driven an awful lot of investment and a lot of buzz around the city. And each year leading up till 2008 has been a themed year. Next year's our 800th anniversary as well, so there's another big event next year, but it's all building up to this 2008 European Capital of Culture.
Liverpool, I think most Americans know, one thing about Liverpool, that the Beatles came from there. I also think of the White Star Lines. What is there to see in Liverpool right now before 2008?
Well, there's an awful lot, to be honest. As you rightly say, I mean, the Beatles are a major facet within Liverpool. We've actually even got 2 of the old houses where John Lennon used to live and where Paul McCartney used to live. They've actually been bought by the National Trust, and they are now sort of monuments. In fact, they've done a really super job with them. What they've actually done is they've recreated the houses exactly as they were when John and Paul used to live in them. So you can actually go on a tour and be taken to these 2 houses and have a look and see what they were like, exactly the same as when they used to live there, which is a bit creepy, but it's quite interesting.
I'm used to seeing that for somewhat older historic figures, not so much for rock stars, obviously.
Yeah, well, they do have a high level of importance within the city, and
sure.
within the UK as well, yeah. But, I mean, going to other things, there's all sorts. Where can we start? I mean, the architecture and the culture within Liverpool is actually quite established. We're a very old city, so we've got quite a few really very important buildings. In fact, one of the reasons we got we were awarded a City of Heritage status, I think a few years ago as well, because of the whole redevelopment that's happened on the waterfront. We have old docks that have been redeveloped into shopping and office and accommodation. And there's a particularly famous one now called Albert Dock, which is quite a big it's quite a big attraction for tourists at the moment. So there's the Albert Dock and all the sort of historic buildings around the waterfront itself.
And it looked to me like the Albert Dock area had been redone into an area with restaurants as well as museums and shops and such.
That's right. Yeah, it's a big retail development, but as you rightly say, there's restaurants. It's quite. They're actually just doing some more development down there at the moment. Again, sort of with the 2008 Capital of Culture, they're actually redeveloping about 42 acres of the city centre, and part of that overlaps onto the sort of the waterfront, and they're building a new 10,000-seat conference centre in the Albert Dock area. And then sort of backing away from the Albert Dock, there's a whole... I mean, it's unbelievable to see it now because there's literally a forest of cranes, and they're building this 42-acre retail development called the Paradise Project, which I think it's going to be ready halfway through next year, at least the first stages of it, but it should all be ready for the 2008 Capital of Culture.
Now, it's interesting for me as an American, you say 800 years old, and my first reaction is, wow, that's really old. And then I realized that in England, it's not quite as old. So you're basically Liverpool was built as a Norman city. It doesn't predate the Norman conquest.
Again, you've got me on that one. To be honest, I don't really know that much about the historic Liverpool. I'm more of a contemporary Liverpudlian. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of old sections in Liverpool, or is it mostly a very, very modern city?
No. There are quite a few. If you actually go into the town centre itself, there's a lot of historic buildings in there. There's the St George's Hall, which is a neo-Georgian building, which is again it's being redeveloped at the moment. That's an amazing site. That's a really nice building. There's the Three Graces in Liverpool. You've heard of the Liver Birds, which is from where we take our name.
I have not.
Oh right, okay. Well, there used to be. I think they're extinct. I don't think they're a current type of bird. But there used to be a bird called a liver bird, and Liverpool actually used to be a pool. So obviously we're on the River Mersey, and it was the symbol of the city is the liver bird within a pool. And right in the middle on the waterfront, there's a very famous building called the Liver Building, and that has two turrets, and on each turret is two liver birds. So that's quite famous, and that's one of Three Graces. Now the other two there's another two famous buildings down there as well, which make up these Three Graces. They keep saying they're going to build a fourth Grace, and make that a very modern building, but that's never happened as of yet. Some of the other buildings as well, it's two major buildings that we should point out are the two cathedrals. We have the Anglican Cathedral, which is quite an old building. I think that took about 120 years to actually build. It was quite a stately building. It's very very impressive. And then we have the Metropolitan Cathedral, which is a relative new building, and that was built, I think, about 30 or 40 years ago. And they're joined together by a street famously known as Hope Street, which is quite appropriate for joining sort of the two religions together.
Interesting. So when someone comes from out of town who's never been to Liverpool, friends of yours come, what do you do? What do you recommend?
The nice thing about Liverpool is that the city itself is very compact, so it's quite easily to sort of take a walk around and, I say, starting from the waterfront, sort of to walk back into the city itself. There's also things like the football. We're quite well known for sport as well. We have our football stadiums. We've got Liverpool and Everton FC, and again they both have their own visitor attractions. There's quite a few tours now. As I mentioned before about the Beatles, you can take a magical mystery tour. So that heads off from the Albert Dock and takes you around some of the from the sites of Liverpool. There's also a really nice tour which is an old amphibious bus, and that actually takes you around the city and also takes you onto the water as well, sort of to give you a view of the River Mersey and then back onto the shore again.
Is that the duck tours?
That's right.
Okay. I didn't realize they had come to England. Interesting.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's the only one I'm aware of, so I don't know if they've they're sort of in other places, but we definitely have one in Liverpool.
Oh, interesting. And I understand if you do the Beatles tour, you'll get to see Penny Lane, and you'll get to see the bank where the banker worked, and all of the various things that are mentioned in a lot of different early Beatles songs, especially.
That's right. And there's a lot of references to Liverpool. Strawberry Fields. There's that. They take you past Strawberry Fields. Actually, it's funny you should mention Penny Lane, because I used to when I used to go to school, I used to get my bus from Penny Lane.
Yeah.
In fact, it's really strange is that when I was quite young and I was we used to have our games field just off Penny Lane. My school didn't have its own sort of playing field, so we used to get a bus and go to Penny Lane for our sports days. And one particular day we spotted a film crew filming, and they had an old fireman on a horse. And they were sort of filming around him, and it was only later that we realised that they were actually filming a video for Penny Lane.
Interesting.
So I didn't actually get on it, but I actually did see it being filmed. So that's one of my sort of mini claim to fames.
If I go to Liverpool and I look in the tour book, it's going to recommend that I do certain things. what sort of things do the tourists do in Liverpool that you'd say just skip? It's just a waste of time.
To be honest, there's not that much really. Most things are quite interesting. I don't really want to. Yeah, there's not a lot. I would say it's naff or anything. It's all pretty good stuff.
Okay, then the other way around, what things do the tour books they don't mention, but you tell your friends when they come visit you?
Right. Well, there's a couple of things, I suppose. One is, I mean, there is plenty to do in the city, and the city's quite a vibrant city, so there's lots of restaurants. But if you want to actually sort of come out of the city centre and go to a place where more locals go to, there's an area probably about 3 or 4 miles outside of the city called Lark Lane. And that's quite good for small restaurants and bistros and pubs and clubs and things. So that's always worth the trip. Another thing which doesn't tend to get mentioned in the tourist books is a very strange attraction, and it's one called Williamson's Tunnels. Now it's got a bit of history behind it, in that it actually was only discovered, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. It's only been a relative discovery, and what it is it's a series of caverns that have been carved out of the sandstone. In one of the Liverpool suburbs, and people have been really scratching their heads trying to work out why it was done. It transpires that the guy who actually arranged for the building of the tunnels, this guy called Williamson, was a benefactor for the locals, and because there was no work at the time, he actually engaged locals to start building these tunnels, but for no apparent reason. So it's a little bit of a folly, really. Yeah, but there's now an exhibit there, and you can actually go into the tunnels and have a look at these huge caverns and see what they're like.
Huh.
It's very strange one.
Interesting. And what else would we do if we came to Liverpool?
A lot of it is to do with timing as well, when you actually during the time that you come to Liverpool, because we do have certain festivals and things. In April time we have I don't know if you're familiar over in the US with the Grand National, which is like the premier horse racing event.
Okay, yeah.
We have over here, yeah. That happens in Aintree. We have a race course in Aintree, which is just on the outskirts of Liverpool. So that happens sort of every April. So that's quite a major sporting event for us. What else do we have? Oh yeah, there's also, again, going back to the Beatles, there's the Matthew Street Festival, which is something that is really, really popular, and that happens around August time. In fact, I think next year they're having an International Beatles Week. So there's 7 days of activities going on around Matthew Street and the environment around Matthew Street. Matthew Street is where the Beatles were actually formed. That's where the original
okay.
was.
I was racking my brain for Beatles songs, trying to remember a reference to Matthew Street. I wasn't coming up with any, so...
Right. No, the Matthew Street is the original Cavern Club, which is where they sort of came to fame before they went to Germany and everything. That's been demolished, but they've sort of rebuilt it on the same site. That is now sort of like a central hub for all Beatle-related activity, and every August they have, I think, a 3-day weekend event whereby they get all sorts of, not only just Beatles bands, but all sorts of bands that come in and play live, and they get thousands and thousands of visitors to attend that, and that's very popular.
Interesting.
We also have, with being based on the waterfront as well, we also have lots of tall ship races, or at least once a year there's a major tall ships race. So combine that with the Albert Dock and the tall ships, again that tends to be quite a big event every so often.
Now, Liverpool obviously sort of rose to fame because of the shipping out of Liverpool and the shipyards. Is it still very much a maritime city, and is there a lot of information or relics left over from the days of the big steamships and such?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, a lot of the original office building, you mentioned the White Star Line before. In fact, I think that's one of the 3 graces. One of the buildings is to do with the White Star Line.
Oh, okay.
In fact, there's another development going on to bring the cruise ships back into Liverpool.
Oh, interesting.
Because that sort of did disappear for a while. But again, sort of tying into the 2008 Capital of Culture, I think they're building a £20 million cruise dock, so that we can start taking the cruise ships again, because Liverpool is being redeveloped as a major tourist centre now. So I think that's going to be ready in the middle of next year, I think. There are still docks, but there's certainly no way, I think it's the same for most sort of maritime cities now, that the docks are still an important part, but nowhere near the importance as they used to be.
You mentioned at the beginning Liverpudlians being also known by us too, which is interesting to me. Anything else that's a particularly Liverpool food or a Liverpool experience?
Not so much a food. Let me think. I think one of the things that Liverpudlians are mainly thought or regarded for is their humour.
Oh, okay.
The humour and the sort of the warmth of the people. We have quite a few famous comedians that have come out of Liverpool, so that's something that we're fairly proud of. Mind you, saying that, you probably don't know any of them over in the US, but we have had quite a few sort of major UK comedians come out of Liverpool, and also not forgetting, we always mention the Beatles, but there's quite a vibrant music scene in Liverpool, and there was right from the 60s, and that's sort of carried through right the way through. So we get some quite big bands coming out of Liverpool.
What time of year is the best time of year to go to Liverpool, or what time to avoid?
There's no real sort of quiet time.
Oh, really? Okay.
Obviously, the summertime is best because we're in the north of England, so it does get a little bit chilly in the winter. But again, nothing. We have a very moderate climate, so it's not too bad. Yeah, pretty much all the way through, really. To be honest, because of the amount of redevelopment, things are really going to kick off the middle of next year. But that's not to put people off coming before then, because there is still plenty of things to see in and around Liverpool up until those celebrations kick off.
And you say around Liverpool, if I come to Liverpool and I use that as a base, where am I close to then, too? What else should I see if I'm in the area?
Yeah, it's quite well placed, actually, because we have a fantastic motorway network in the northwest of England. So you're normally within an hour or two of quite a few sort of major centres. Our nearest major city is Manchester, and that, again, similar to Liverpool, that's sort of a major retail shopping centre and other sort of attractions that you'd find in a major city. You have Blackpool, which is a very sort of kitsch, touristy place, which is theme parks and very. In some respects, it's a bit old-fashioned, really, but it's a real sort of seaside. What we say in England, it's a seaside town, and
okay.
It's well worth a visit just to see. It can be a bit tacky. I hope there's not too many people from Blackpool listening to this, but it's an experience anyway. But a bit further on from Blackpool, you have the Lake District. So for hiking and some beautiful scenery. We have the Lake District to the north. We have the Pennines as well, which is the other side of Manchester, so, old fells and moorlands and things. And then across to the west of us...
And you've just exceeded my English geography there, the Pennines.
The Pennines, yes, the mountain range that sort of is down the centre of England.
Okay.
So it's probably about, an hour and a half to reach the Pennines from Liverpool. Just across the River Mersey and across the peninsula there, that we have Wales. You have North Wales, which again, lots of seaside towns there and lots of mountains and things to explore. So it's very centrally placed for lots of exploration throughout the north.
Okay. Anything else that people should know before they venture off to Liverpool to celebrate, especially here in 07 and into 08, the European Capital of Culture?
Yeah, it's just be prepared. I mean, do some planning first, but there is an awful lot to get around. I mean, don't be surprised at just how rich the experience can be, especially with the various museums. We have the North Tate Gallery, so if you're into art and things, we have the Northern Tate, which is in the Albert Dock area. It's a very vibrant and bustling city, really.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for being on the show and telling us a little bit about Liverpool.
No problem.
I appreciate you taking the time, Dan.
Well, if ever you get over here, I'll be glad to show you around.
Oh, well, now you were offering that to everybody, or is that just to me?
Form an orderly queue.
I was still recording here, so... Just drop me an email and I'll send it off to Don, and we'll take him up on that offer.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
Thanks to Don for that interview, and my apologies to you for getting the sound levels wrong for that, so you had to listen to me breathing while Don was talking. And thanks to Levelator from Gigabox Network, which helped me get the audio in at least as good a state as I was able to get it into. Just after we turned off the microphone, Don did recall that Edinburgh was one of the previous European capitals of culture, and that really put them on the map as far as a tourist destination. In keeping with the maritime history of Liverpool, For the Internet Resources portion of the show, I have two resources which I got from the One Girl, Her Backpack, and a Passion for Travel blog. And they are workonaboat.com and extraordinaryjobs.com. And this was part of an article for So You Want to Work on a Cruise Ship or a Yacht. So, interesting place to go if you're looking for a rather unusual way to travel at someone else's expense. Another article which caught my attention recently was something for if you're taking your laptop with you, how to keep it safe, keep your data safe, that is. And that's an article from USA Today called Taking Your Laptop, Keep It and Your Precious Data Safe. And I'll put links to that and all of these articles in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I got an email last week from John and I'm going to pronounce his video blog as Jimmy Craighead TV. And John said, Chris, I enjoy your show and your posts to the MacCast. I thought you might enjoy my last post from Berlin, which complements the show about Berlin you did back in April. Maybe a shout out if you feel it appropriate. If you ever need the thoughts of a Philly boy of 47 years, I'd love to chat. I'm a little concerned that you're signing the email, John, and that your video podcast is from Jimmy. But that being said, yeah, maybe we should do a show on Philly, and I'll send you an email, John. And I'll put links to his video blog, his video podcast in the show notes. Timothy left a post on the amateurtraveler.com, a comment, and it says, a nice trip report. This is particularly about episode 69, Ecuador and Peru. A nice trip report, but your guest was misled at the museum in Ecuador. It is a myth that sinks and toilets drain in opposite directions on either side of the equator. The Coriolis effect only operates on a large scale, affecting weather systems with hurricanes in particular, but being totally ineffective towards smaller things. There is a good explanation here, and he gives me a particular site that I will put up. Actually, that's already in the comments on that particular episode from Wikipedia about draining bathtubs. You might check that out. Not trying to start controversy here, but I was a little puzzled to hear why the Coriolis effect would in fact be effective at that small a scale. Boy, let's see if I can say that 10 times fast. I also got a video just a few weeks back from the musician and fellow podcaster John Hammond, who I've met at the San Francisco Podcasters Meetup. And John sent a video in, and I'll put the links to that in the show notes, that was shot aboard a Highlander Boeing 747-123 on a flight to Scotland. So you might be interested in seeing that if you, not being a famous musician, have never had a chance to get inside the cockpit of a Boeing 747. And then lastly, in the community section of the show, I got an email that made me laugh out loud from a friend and former coworker, John, and John writes this. So I just bought my wife her own iPod. We hooked it up this weekend. I told her to go to Podcast Alley, and look who I see. Cool. Anyway, hope all is well. John was pointing out that he went to Podcast Alley, and my picture is still there up on the front of Podcast Alley with the interview. I don't know if you've had a chance to check that out, but it kind of surprised them to see me there, and it was fun for me as well. And with that, I think it's time to say thanks so much for listening to The Amateur Traveler. Please give me feedback on the show. Post comments on the discussion board like Timothy did. Send me email like John did. Or call the comment line, which is at 206-MOM-LOVE. You can also leave voice comments on amateurtraveler.com using the MobiTalk comment system on the left-hand side. Always looking forward to hearing from you. Remember, we are still having a contest that the person whose post on the discussion boards I pick at random, that is not spam, on December 31st will win an iPod Nano. So good luck, keep up your posts, and thanks so much for listening.
The best and the brightest, served up daily by the sharpest minds in content delivery. Podshow and Limelight.